of health insurance cost in Texas. Health insurance has nothing to do with health care, but the two seg together pretty cohesively. We have had Republican leadership in the state of Texas. This is how bad, how far away we are from understanding the role of government. We've had Republican leadership in Texas for a number of years, and we have adopted 60 mandates on health insurance. Every health insurance policy sold in Texas must comport to these requirements. You say, well, Deborah, what's the mandate? In vitro fertilization. I'm 47 years old. I got 2 kids. I don't want any more. And I darn sure don't want to be paying for in vitro fertilization on my health care policy. But I'm paying for it, and so are every one of you. You're paying for 60 things like that. I talked to the director of the National Federation of Independent Business People in Austin, and I said, it seems to me that's the primary cause of the increase in health insurance cost in Texas. He said, that's correct. I said, why are we doing that? We've got Republicans sitting in Austin. He said, because every session, a special interest group comes to Austin and says, we need this benefit. 2 sessions ago, it was the parents of autistic children. Our legislators don't have the courage to look those parents in the eye and say, I'm very sorry that your child is suffering from autism. It's a condition that is becoming more prevalent in the society, and it's a problem. I'll tell you what I'll do. As your state representative, I will study the situation, and then I will send a letter to the leaders of all of the commercial insurance plans in Texas, Humana, United, Blue Cross, Aetna, and I'll let them know that we're hearing from our constituents that there's a need in the market, because where there is demand, there will be a supply, right?
That's right.
That's what government ought to be doing, and instead we said, okay, we'll take care of you. And the cost goes up for everybody, and the availability goes down for everybody. We've got to have people in office who understand what the role of government is and what protects freedom and what destroys it. And when we do that, we will begin to turn the ship back to where it ought to be. So what is that, Deborah? I think 2 things first and foremost. Our founders knew it. History has proven it. The freest and most prosperous nations are those that understand the importance of private property ownership and gun ownership. We've all been raised hearing that home ownership is the American dream. None of us, not one, owns our home.
That's right.
We don't own the land that our family's been farming. We don't own our ranch. We do not own our land in Texas. That is a freedom issue. It is not a fiscal issue. These arguments that we've been allowing, that we've been promoting in Austin, we've been taking buses of voters to Austin to demand property tax, appraisal cap reform, is a diversion. Does nothing to secure private property ownership, which is an essential element of freedom. If you believe that, if you believe property ownership is as essential to freedom as oxygen is to life, you don't give it up. Right. You don't say it's all right to let a little piece of it go, because you'll get to a place where your children or your grandchildren will bleed to secure the freedom that you pilfered away. Private property ownership is an essential element of freedom. We've got to eliminate property tax in Texas so that we restore property ownership. I cannot stress enough that that's a freedom thing. Think about that, chew on it, get it in, because everywhere you turn, your elected officials are going to say, but what about, but how do we fund, but where do we get the money for? Your answer has got to be, find another way. I am not giving up my freedom. I live in the United States of America, in the great state of Texas, and I'm a free man, and I was born that way, and I'm going to die that way, and I'm not giving it up. When we get there, then we will get rid of property tax. I think we can do it in this session. I think the litmus test in the Republican Party ought not be just are you pro-life, it ought to be are you pro-property. Every state representative is up for election, every one of them. You get a House of Representatives in the state of Texas that's pro-property, you'll get rid of property tax in the next session.
All right.
It's up to you. These House districts are small districts. We get a majority in that House that want to get rid of property tax, we'll get rid of property tax. And you know, the neat thing about freedom is it walks hand in hand with prosperity. We've got a study. This is not just some cockamamie idea from a nurse in South Texas. We've got a study out of the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Texas Public Policy Foundation is a conservative think tank in Austin, Texas. It's been around for a number of years. It has been championing getting rid of property tax, but it's met resistance because they've looked at it from a purely fiscal, and that report, the study that they issued in April of last year, is a fiscal report. It looks at the monetary implications of that. It doesn't address the freedom issue at all. And that's where the guys in Austin have been derailed. Those who want to get rid of property tax have totally focused on it because of the money without understanding the underlying principle of why you have to have property ownership. But that study says that the economy could be thought of as a pack mule, and any tax that you place on the citizenry is a pack on the back of that mule. Property tax and income tax are the most poorly loaded packs you can possibly place on the back of that mule. He will not produce, he will not perform near as well as he will perform if you spread that tax burden across the back of the mule with a consumption or a sales tax. Do not use an income tax. Don't be fooled. You have one in Texas. It's called a business margins tax. Don't use an income tax, and don't use a property tax to fund government service. Use a sales tax. It's the fairest, it's the easiest to collect, it's the most transparent, and it forces the greatest degree of accountability, because when your pocketbook gets pinched, you quit spending money.
That's right.
With a property tax, they get that revenue come rain or shine, and they keep spending like there's no tomorrow. People say, well, what are you going to do when there's an economic downturn? I said, quit spending. We quit spending. Why didn't government quit spending? If they don't want to quit spending, they got to come back to you, the voter, and say, we need to raise property tax. And you'll say, no, you don't. You need to cut spending. That study says revenue neutral. That means we're going to draw as much tax from sales tax as we did from property. Zero change in the total dollars collected. Revenue neutral property tax elimination in Texas gives us a $3 billion increase in net personal income the first year. I've got a number of economists on an economics team with me, and I said, you boys check the curves on that. And that study goes into that. If you're an economics major professor, you like that, you want to look at the curves. They had to get it pretty simple for me. Here's why we get a $3 billion increase. The state still ends up with the same amount of tax revenue, and we've all got $3 billion more money in our pockets as Texans. Why is that? How can that happen? Because when you write a property tax check, it goes straight to the government coffer. If instead, on February 1st, 2010, you don't owe any property tax, that check that you used to write, mine's about $3,200. That $3,200 now either gets spent in my local community, or it goes into a savings account that becomes the basis of capital investment. Gives the bank something to lend to the restaurant that wants to add on or expand, or to the dry cleaner that wants to provide more service in their community. It becomes the basis of capital investment in your local community. When you spend that money locally, the studies say that dollar gets spent 3 to 5 times before it ends up in the government coffer. That's economic activity. You eliminate property tax in Texas and you add 150,000 jobs. I think the study actually says 125 to 350. I thought 150 was way down on the conservative end, and I picked that number. But if you Google it, you look up the study, the job growth, real job growth is phenomenal. Such a little thing. What did the astronauts say? One small step for man, one giant step for mankind. Such a little thing. Look what it would do for the state of Texas.